everybody, and welcome back to English for Writing Business Emails. My name is Brian Stewart, and in this video lesson we're going over Unit 2, Part 4, and we're taking a look at proofreading an example student email. Now, the idea of this exercise is to review many of the common mistakes and the suggestions that I gave you in the past 3 video lessons, and also to go over some things that we talked about in Unit 1. Okay, so this is kind of a typical email that I get from students in email workshops, and it's reproduced here on page 26 in the book, English for Writing Business Emails. If you haven't picked up a copy yet, please do so. It would help me out a lot, and it would help me to produce more of these videos. There is information and links down below this video in the video description down below where you could order a book. Anyway, when we take a look at this email on page 26, we can see that basically the writer is asking the reader for 2 things. One, he wants the reader to send him some confidential information. After reading this email, it seems that they're working together closely, so it doesn't seem like it's a problem to send the confidential information, but he just needs it for an internal review. The second request is about a meeting that the reader has requested. So we'll take a look at this email to clean up any incorrect expressions or common mistakes that are being made, and also to take a look at if we can organize the information a little bit more clearly, and also if we could use some more natural expressions. So let's dig in. Okay, so take a look at the email on page 26 and think about what is the very first thing that you might want to change or that you might have a question about. Look carefully. And remember, I'm giving you the hint, the very first thing that you see that might be odd or should be changed. And you might have noticed the address to wildman@cdi.co.au. So obviously, you can't really do much about that, but the other person, the person who's receiving this, shouldn't have an email address like this. This, of course, is not appropriate. Now, this is not such a big issue these days, but I hope that your email address that you use for your professional business writing is a professional email address, and it doesn't say, for example, cute girl 2008 or hot guy 2010. And of course, wildman is also not appropriate. Nowadays, people will use their initials and their company name. So they'll probably use something like this, yoonjh@kgra.gov.co.kr. That is, of course, a more professional email address. So, of course, I don't run into that kind of situation nowadays. Most people nowadays will do something like this with their name, using their last name or their initials, or just all initials at their company name. And that's appropriate. So just make sure that you have that. The second thing that you might have noticed, though, is also take a look at the subject line. The subject line is biz, B-I-Z, which is sometimes a common abbreviation of business. It's informal, of course, biz, and then meeting. But as we talked about in Unit 1, this is very vague, right? If I want to go back and take a look at this email, find the particular email, this particular email, I might have a little bit of a difficult time because it's not very specific. We want to be more specific in our subject line. So what I would suggest is something like this. QQ, purpose of proposed meeting. So this, of course, is much more specific as to the contents of the email. It only has one request, but you could put the other request, QQ, purpose of proposed meeting / request for confidential information, but that's getting kind of long. Most of the email is about the reason for the meeting. For example, why did you call the meeting, and is it okay if we change the date? We'll get into that a little bit. So that's the main purpose of the meeting. So let's focus on that. And remember, from Unit 1, we talked about QQ. QQ means quick question. So I'm just sending you an email, just a quick question. Could you tell me what is the purpose of the proposed meeting? Okay, now let's get into the body of the email itself. What is the first thing that we see that should be changed? You might notice something odd about the salutation. And that odd thing is that the comma is in the wrong position, right? There should be a comma here, not here. It's actually very frequent that I notice this. So please remember, the comma goes after the person's name. It's at the end of the salutation. Then put your comma or your colon. Okay, but not after dear or good morning or whatever you use. It's after the name. Okay, so that's the wrong position. We need to fix it like this. Okay, that's fine. Okay, next we have thank you for your kind notice about MOU. Now this is a good way to start off your email. It looks like these two people are in constant contact. They're emailing each other back and forth. We can also determine that because they're on a first name basis. So this is a little bit of a less formal email. That's fine. Most emails are informal. After you've established contact, and especially if you're working closely with someone, you can use their first name. So it's a nice touch to start off an email by thanking them for their previous communication, whatever it was. However, there is a grammatical problem. MOU stands for Memorandum of Understanding, and it is a specific thing because the reader already mentioned it. So it's a second mention. We need an article here, right? So we need an article. What article should we use? Well, it's a specific mention, so we should use the. So thank you for your kind notice about the MOU. We're talking about something specific. The reader knows it and the writer knows it. They both know it. Okay, so let's move on. Next we have, first, it would be thankful if you send us the confidential data package CDP about your CASM program for our deep review. A couple things I'd like to say about this, and you may have noticed an incorrect expression from one of the earlier video lessons on Unit 2. But also, I'd just like to point out, I don't know what CDP is. I don't know what CASM is. I have no idea, right? This was an email written by one of my students. Of course, they're working for a certain company. They know what those acronyms mean. They have meaning to them. And of course, the reader would know them as well because they're working closely together. But it's not important for our purposes to know what those acronyms mean. So the first thing I'd like to say about this is that it's a bit abrupt just to start off with first, right after you thanked somebody. First what? It's too abrupt. It's like you're changing gears too suddenly, and it may take the reader, whoa, what's going on, right? They might think, what do you mean first? First what? So you should use some type of transitionary expression. For example, you could use this. There are two questions I would like to ask you, and then use a colon. When you use a colon, it's a good idea then to use a bullet list, and you can number it. Number 1, first question. Number 2, second question. You could also do this. I have a couple of requests, again with the colon, and then have bullet point 1 and bullet point 2. Okay? Another expression you could use, we were wondering if you could send us some information. Of course, you use a period, and then you could write first as the next sentence, first comma, and then say what the information is that you would like first. Finally, you could also say, could you let us know about the following? And again, you use a colon. So in this one, and this one, you could follow those with a bullet list and just have number 1, first question, number 2, second question. In this case, I just wrote a new sentence. I would like to follow up with a couple of requests. I wrote I would like to follow up, right? Because I'm thanking them for their kind notice about the MOU, and then I'm replying, but I'd like to follow up with something else. And that's a good transitionary expression as well. So you can add that to the other 4 expressions we just went over. In this case, it's just a new sentence, so I'm not using a bullet list. You can if you want, it's up to you. But I would like to follow up with a couple of requests. First, okay, now that's much better flow of information, and it's not so abrupt, and it doesn't make the reader, suddenly switch gears like, whoa, what's going on? First what, right? Well, first request. Okay, I've introduced a couple of requests. The first request, right? It would be thankful if you send us the confidential data package. Now, did you catch the incorrect expression here that we went over in an earlier lesson? Of course, that would be it would be thankful. Remember, this is very similar to it would be grateful, right? It doesn't make sense if you say it would be thankful. We need to change it. How do we change it? We have a lot of different expressions that we could use. We could say, we would appreciate it if you could. So it's kind of a review. You could say, we would be thankful, not it would be thankful. I explained why in a previous lesson. Or we would be grateful. Thankful, grateful, they're synonymous. You could also write, it would be great if you could, right? Or it would be appreciated if you sent us, or you could send us. You could also say, could you please? That's a little more informal, but that would be the right tone for this email. Like I said before, they're on a first name basis, so it is a bit of an informal email. And finally, you could say, just please send us something, which is also less formal. So these here are quite formal. These are formal, not quite as formal as the first group, and these here are the least formal. So in this case, I wrote, first, we would appreciate it if, right? It's okay, even though it's an informal email, it depends on the request that you're making. You're asking for some confidential data. Now, whether or not it's a problem or an issue for the reader's company to send the confidential data package to the writer's company, I'm not sure. If it's a big ask, if you're asking them to do something that you think they might have some reluctance to do it, or it might be a little difficult for them to do, then yes, it's a good idea to use a more formal expression. If it's not such a big ask, it's not a big deal, then use a less formal expression. In this case, we just used, we would appreciate it if you could send us the confidential data package about your CASM program for our deep review. Now, deep review, I saw that. At first, I'm like, deep review, that sounds a bit odd, but it's used. It's not incorrect. But there are other expressions you can use. You could say, for example, we would appreciate if you could send us the confidential data package for our deep review, or just for our review. Deep review means that it's quite a formal, detailed, very thorough review. I was looking around the internet for this expression. I couldn't find too many examples, but what I did find, the examples were suggesting that it would be a very detailed, very technical, perhaps, review of something. And I noticed that a lot of medical companies or pharmaceutical companies will use this, especially if they're looking at something from a scientific point of view and they're examining something in a very, very detailed manner. But it's okay, for our deep review, just for our review. Although I think a detailed review is probably more common than a deep review. So you could say for a thorough or detailed review. So for a thorough review or for a detailed review, or you could just say so that we could review it in detail. Maybe I'm being picky about this, but I just had some questions about that. But they're all okay. But just for your information, you could use all of these or any of these. Okay, moving on, I have an issue about tone. Tone refers to the level of formality in your email. It also may touch upon whether your email sounds rude or aggressive, or polite and professional. In this case, in the next sentence, I did notice something interesting here. It said, for the in-person meeting, we want to know the purpose of the meeting. Now, when you use the expression, we want to know, that sounds a little aggressive. And I'll talk more about this in Unit 4. We'll have a deep discussion, we'll have a detailed discussion about this in Unit 4. So, when you use the expression, we want to know, I advise students don't write sentences like this. I want to know, or we want to know, or just I want to, or we want to. It could sound aggressive. It sounds a little too demanding. It doesn't sound very professional. So how can we change it? Well, we don't want to write we want to, because that sounds aggressive, or I want to, as I said before. Much better expressions would be something like this. We would like to. This sounds much more professional. It has a higher level of English, a higher level of professionalism. Also, it doesn't sound aggressive, and the other person won't think you're being rude if you write we would like to instead of we want to. Other expressions, I would like to. Of course, we would like to, I would like to. Or, again, using the expression we've covered before, we would appreciate it if you could let us know the purpose of the meeting. You could also just simply write, could you, and you might want to put please in there, could you please let us know or inform us what the purpose of the meeting is? So we could write, for the in-purpose meeting, could you let us know what the purpose of the meeting is? That sounds friendly. But it might sound friendlier if you just wrote, could you let us know what you would like to discuss in the meeting? That's much more friendly, and it's also a little more informal. Of course, if you want to be a little bit more formal, you could write concerning the in-person meeting or regarding the in-person meeting. Did you request it for a detailed discussion? There's a reason for this question, though. And when you talk about reasons for asking questions, it's a good idea, again, to give transitional expressions, connect your ideas. So I would like to first point out that this is a poor connection between the two ideas. The reason that the person is asking about what they want to discuss in the meeting is because the boss will not be present during the time that the reader requested the meeting. So let's connect the ideas. Let's connect the dots for our reader. Also, we can see that the next sentence is way too long. It starts here and it finishes here. And we have a lot of information, right, in this sentence. Not be able to attend the meeting due to vacation during the period you mentioned. There's a lot of different thoughts going on in this sentence, so it's way too long. And of course, as I pointed out, we have a few other issues in the rest of the sentence, in the second sentence, including some incorrect grammar. So let's go over them one by one. First of all, connect your ideas, right? You asked the question. Now, to follow up, you could use an expression like this. The reason I ask is because, okay? So, could you let us know the purpose of the meeting? Or could you let us know what you would like to discuss during the meeting? The reason I ask is because, or this is because, or we would like to know because, or the reason for our request is because my boss will be out of the office on the date you requested for the meeting. Okay? So, connect your ideas. Also, as we see, this paragraph, that it's almost a paragraph, only it's just one sentence, is too long. There's a good rule in writing. Keep it simple. We'll talk about that in Unit 5 a little bit more. We'll do some more examples. But whenever you find that you've written a very long sentence, see if you can break it up into smaller sentences that are easier for the reader to digest, to understand. So, for example, this information here in the orange text, I rewrote it in blue text here to make it seem a little easier. And I've also included the transitional expression here. The reason I ask is because the date you requested is not ideal. Okay, so that's the main point, right? I'm asking you what you want to discuss in the meeting because the meeting date that you requested is not the best date because my boss, the functional head of our new products and bioresearch center, will be on vacation. Now, you don't have to get personal. You don't have to say exactly why she's out of the office. You could just say, will be out of the office and keep it generic. Some people will prefer that instead of giving the more personal reason. For example, she will be on vacation, or she will be visiting family in another country, or she will be out on sick leave, right? The other person doesn't really need to know those personal details, so maybe she will be out of the office is enough. And also, you can use parentheses to add information, right? She is fluent in English. Now, of course, that's kind of important information, but it's just like another detail that you want to throw in there. And this is one of the reasons why I would like to know what you would like to discuss during the meeting. Because when I read this and I read between the lines, of course, the email is in English, so I'm assuming the meeting will be in English as well. And that's exactly what we follow up with. This next sentence here, again in orange text, is so if you want a deep discussion, I suggest that we have a TC on the week of April 22nd after she come back. Now I've underlined the issues that I have with this sentence. As I noted before, it's not necessary, but I just think it sounds more professional if you start a sentence with therefore instead of so. It just sounds more professional that way. There's no problem. Of course, you can start with so. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's up to you. But it does sound more professional to use therefore instead of so. But it's your choice. So, therefore, if you would like an in-depth, I just changed deep to in-depth. In-depth discussion, I think, is more common. But again, that's not a serious issue. If you would like an in-depth discussion, I suggest that we have a teleconference. I spelled it out. I know the tendency in business is to abbreviate a lot of things, but TC, maybe that's not as universal as MOU, for example, or QQ. Maybe not everybody will understand right away what a TC is. Of course, it means teleconference. If you're using it already and you're using it with people who already know what it means, fine, do it. But if you're not using it with people that you know well, don't say TC, just spell it out. And maybe they'll write back TC, and then you can start using that back and forth with that person. But I'd recommend, use the proper name for that type of situation instead of abbreviating. I suggest that we have a teleconference, and you don't have a teleconference on the week of April 22nd. You have a teleconference during the week of April 22nd. We use on for a specific day. If you said, let's have a teleconference on April 22nd, that's fine. But no, you're talking about the week of April 22nd. So maybe April 22nd is a Monday, 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th to Friday. That is several days. That's 5 working days. And that is during the week. We don't say on the week. We say during the week, because the week is a larger expanse of time. And on one of those days within the week, during the week, you will have your teleconference. So not on the week, during the week of April 22nd. And there's no need to use ND or ST or RD after ordinal numbers. Now you can, and some word processing programs automatically put it in there for you if you're writing dates. Some of them do, some of them don't. You don't have to. The trend is not to do it. However, when you do pronounce it, if you read it aloud, you should read it as an ordinal number. So even though you may write it as April 22, it should be pronounced as April 22nd, because it is a date. Okay, but there's no need to use ND or those little endings after the number for ordinal numbers in your writing. You can if you want, but the trend is going away from that. And then, of course, there's a grammatical problem here. After she come back? No, after she comes back, right? So the boss will be gone. She will come back after, or she'll come back after April 22nd if it's a Monday, right? She'll be present during that week. So after she comes back, I suggest, if you want to have a detailed discussion, if you want to talk about a lot of details, and you obviously want the answers in English, I would suggest that we postpone or delay the meeting. Maybe it's not convenient for you because of your travel plans, so let's have a teleconference instead after she comes back. So that's just a suggestion. That's why the writer wants to know the purpose of the meeting that the reader has requested. So what is the purpose of the meeting? And this is why I want to know, and this is my suggestion. If you want to go this way, we should do this. If you want to go this way, we should do this. And actually, that's kind of what we have next. So they proposed one solution. If you want an in-depth discussion, let's do this. However, I would suggest starting with however. But you can do it, but if you agree that we have, that's fine. And a lot of people will do that for casual emails. There's no problem, but it just sounds more professional. Again, maybe I'm old-fashioned. I would prefer using however. And be careful. Don't capitalize. I don't understand why a lot of students do this. They capitalize after transitional expressions or conjunctions like this. I'm not sure what's going on there. It's kind of a very common thing that I see. Don't suddenly capitalize a word in the middle of the sentence, right? Capitalize the first word or the first letter of the first word in the sentence, but don't just randomly capitalize a word if it's not a name, if it shouldn't be capitalized in the middle of a sentence. So we need to change that to small I. However, if you, here it said in the original, but if you agree that we have just Q&A about the CDP at the meeting, it is possible to have in-person meeting on the week of April 15th. We expect to have your questions. That was the original, as you can see on page 26 in the book. My suggestion, we need to change some things, okay? So I've said change but to however, make sure if is not capitalized. If you agree, that's a little bit odd because when you agree, it's like we're having some maybe disagreement, right? Or maybe there's some problem or issue. There's no problem, there's no issue. You're just proposing or you're just asking the other person, why do you want to have a meeting? Do you want an in-depth discussion? Or do you just want to have a Q&A session, you know, a short Q&A session? So if you would just like a Q&A session, by the way, you need a, right? There was no a in the original. And you should say session, not just Q&A. We have just Q&A. Q&A session, a Q&A session. So if you would just like a short Q&A session, you could put short in there, or brief. If you would just like a brief Q&A session about the CDP, it is possible to have an in-person meeting. So have in-person meeting. Again, be careful with articles. Like I said, articles sometimes drive people crazy, right? You want a meeting, it's an in-person meeting. What kind of meeting? It's an in-person meeting. You need to have an article before meeting. If you would like to have a meeting, in this case, in-person, I is a vowel, so we use an in-person meeting. Without my boss, during, not on the week again, during the week you suggested, or you could use the date, during the week of April 15th. That would be okay. Now again, remember we talked about this before. We expect to have your questions. Sounds a little demanding, right? We expect to have your questions. Make sure you have questions, right? Too demanding, too bossy. So let's change it. We are looking forward to your questions, or you could put in, we are looking forward to answering your questions. Okay? So that's more positive. It doesn't sound demanding like we expect you to have your questions. That's weird. Okay? We expect to have your questions. It also doesn't sound natural. Okay, so we are looking forward to your questions. Okay. Okay, next we have a Konglish alert. Please notice me your opinion about it. Remember, we talked about this in a previous lesson in common mistakes. Notice does not mean to tell someone, to inform someone, to notify someone. That is a Konglish mistake. So be careful. Don't use that. Please notice me your opinion about it. That also sounds a little awkward. What are some better expressions to use? Well, of course, you could say, please let me know what you decide. Please let me know. That sounds friendly, and it's quite natural. Another expression, please let us know what you would like to do. So if you want to be more formal, use us instead of me, okay? But either one's okay. Next, please let us know what you prefer. You could also say that. Or, please let us know how you would like to proceed. Now, this is a good expression to use if you're giving somebody a choice of, you know, do it this way or do it that way. You're suggesting different courses of action. Do you want to hold on to the product for a while or then test it out to see if it works? Or do you want to return it immediately for a different product, right? Please let us know how you would like to proceed. What action you would like to take in the future. So this is a good expression to use in that case. And that's a good expression to use in this case. Do you want to have the meeting during the week of the 15th or after the week of the 22nd after my boss comes back? Please let us know how you would like to proceed. That's a good expression to use. Now these are all a little bit informal because let me know is informal. You could also write, please inform us of your decision. That's more formal, right? Inform is more formal than let us know, and more formal than just tell. Please tell us of your decision. I wouldn't write that. Or please tell us what you want. No, that would not be appropriate for an email. Please tell me what you want. That's too basic. It's too elementary. So please inform us of your decision, or please notify us of the best course of action. Now that's another expression you can use. The best course of action. What do you think is the best course of action. Okay, and that's, again, for this situation, that would be a good one to use. Please notify us of the best course of action. Okay, but inform and notify are more formal than saying let us know or let me know. Again, Konglish alert. If you have any question, please do not hesitate to contacting me. I underlined the mistakes here that we saw in the email on page 26. So these are the two mistakes in the next sentence. And this is kind of common. I see that students do this a lot. After any, the noun should be plural. You should use an S here. If it's a count noun, obviously. If it's a non-count noun, obviously you wouldn't put an S. But you should put an S after a count noun. So after any, count nouns are plural. I see this again and again. So people will write, if you have any question, if you have any issue, if you have any problem. No, any means any possible questions, right? It doesn't just mean one. I mean, think about that. If you wrote, if you have a question, please contact me. But what if I have two questions? Can I still contact you? Right? Because A means one. If you have a question, if you have one question, please contact me. But don't contact me with two questions. No, don't do that. Okay? So people might read into it, right? So, of course, people might have one question. They might have two questions. They could have 10 questions. Anything is possible. So if you have any questions, right? Whether it's one, whether it's two, whether it's several questions, it doesn't matter. Please contact me. Okay, so if you have any problems, if you have any concerns, not just one concern, but maybe several concerns, or if you experience any difficulties, not just one difficulty, it's possible to have more than one difficulty. So if you have any difficulties, please contact me. So please remember, after any, count nouns are plural. Put an S on them. Okay. Next, after to, right, we use the infinitive form of the verb, not the ing gerund form of the verb. To contacting me? No, that's incorrect grammar. Please do not hesitate to contact me. So, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. That's how we would change the next sentence. Okay. Moving on, if you noticed at the bottom of the email on page 26, you notice that it says best regards. Now, I mentioned this before in Unit 1. Only the first word in a valediction is capitalized. Actually, not all native speakers know this either. You know, so native speakers, this is a common mistake that many native speakers will also make. They think that they should capitalize both words in a valediction. But technically, you don't do that. It should be best regards. Now, again, not a lot of people are going to care about this. Nobody's going to say, oh, that's wrong. They probably won't even notice most of the time. But technically, don't capitalize the second or third or fourth word if you have a longer valediction. Mostly valedictions are just one word or two words. Don't capitalize the second word, only the first word. Okay, good. Okay, now it's time for review, so let's go over the main ideas that we touched upon in this video lesson. First, I said connect your ideas. Use transitional expressions to connect the ideas in your email. For example, instead of, saying, how are you doing? And then first, I would like to know, whoa, first what? Lead your reader into that idea. Connect your idea. Say something like, there are 2 requests I would like to make, or there are 2 things I would like to discuss. And then when you ask people questions, maybe you would like to explain those questions, but you could introduce that explanation by saying the reason I ask is because, right? We would like to know what you would like to discuss during the meeting. The reason we ask is because our boss will not be in the office during the date that you suggested, or during the dates that you suggested. So connect your ideas. Second, organize your information or requests. It's a good idea, like I said, to use a transitional expression. There are 2 questions we would like to ask. And then maybe use a bullet point list, 1 and 2. That is a good way to organize your information so the reader can easily understand. Next, pay attention to small details like capitalization and proper placement of commas. These are small details, right? But they don't look professional when you have commas in strange places. Like, for example, dear, comma, Stephen. what's going on there? Or but, comma, and then the rest of the sentence. That is not correct. It doesn't look very professional if you use commas incorrectly, like this. Also, if you capitalize random words in the sentence, like but, comma, and then capital I on if you would like to have a deeper discussion, that's odd, right? It's incorrect. Don't capitalize words for no reason at all, unless, of course, they're proper names of places, people, or things. Another tip was rewrite long sentences into shorter ones for clarity. Remember that really long sentence about the explanation about the boss being out of the office and then cramming all that information into that? That was one sentence, and I rewrote it into 4 sentences. So take a look at the emails that you're writing. If you have a really long sentence where you're trying to put in a lot of information into just one sentence, stop. See where you can break that sentence up and make it into shorter, simpler sentences, because that's good for clarity. Clarity the reader can more easily understand. And then, of course, also touches back on organizing your information more clearly so that the reader can easily understand. So that kind of touches back to the second point. Finally, keep learning more natural expressions. And hopefully in this book, we go over a lot of different expressions for use in emails. And I hope that you can use these expressions to sound more natural in your business email writing. Okay, well, that about wraps up the lesson for today. It's a little bit of a shorter lesson, which might be good. I know my other lessons seem to be running quite long. But anyway, I hope this proofreading was very useful to you. And of course, this is something that I do a lot in my workshops. When students will write emails, I want to correct them and give them instant feedback and help them out. But again, I'm seeing a lot of common mistakes, a lot of common issues that I hope through these videos, and especially through this book, that I can reach a larger, wider audience, and that you can benefit from these ideas, and that you can improve your email writing skill in English. So again, if you have any questions about anything, please let me know. By the way, also on page 29, whenever I do a proofreading, I also rewrite the email. I put myself in the student's shoes and say, well, if I was writing this email, how would I write it? So that's what I did on page 29. And please, consider buying the book. You can check out the email here. Now, if there's something in here that you see and you have a question about, or anything that we covered in the video lesson today, please leave a comment down below. And if you would like to 한국어로 괜찮아요, right? If you want to write it in Korean, please do so, and I'll take a look at that. And I can write the response both in Korean and English for your convenience. If you're a little nervous about writing a question in English, don't worry, 한국어 괜찮아요. Right? That's what I usually tell my students as well. So, thank you very much for studying with me. Again, leave a comment down below if you like it. Subscribe to the channel if you want to be updated to videos as they come out, as we progress through the book. Please subscribe. Thanks for studying with me, and I hope to see you next time. Take care, everybody.